What's up, guys? Starting this video out with a hot take. There are no bad vinyl record pressing plants. That sounds like a blanket statement, but it's true, and that's because the reason for some bad sounding records is not just a plant screwing up. There's a million reasons as to why a record can sound bad when it reaches your door. I want to talk about them. So there's two aspects to the quality control issue. The first is just that the supply cannot meet the demand. We've known about this for a while now, for a few years, and it seemed pretty bleak because the amount of pressing plants that existed just couldn't sustain the sheer growth of vinyl in this just massive bubble that keeps expanding every year. Thankfully, some wheels are in motion to make positive strides towards a better future for all of us as vinyl fans. The first was Jack White calling out the major labels to open pressing plants and put their money where their mouth is.
I now ask the major labels, Warner Brothers, Universal, and Sony, to finally build your own pressing plants again. As the MC5 once said, you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Thank you.
For too long, they sat just complacent, just waiting and waiting and waiting for something to magically fix the problem of overwhelming demand. Jack White, with his own money, made his own pressing plant, and he presses his own records. And that is a precedent that should be set for the larger companies. I don't know why these big labels and companies aren't focusing on doing something that's going to continue to allow them to make money in this incredibly lucrative market right now. They haven't stepped up to the plate yet, but I have a feeling that they will, especially with some of the newer players in the scene like Vinyl Me Please, who just announced that they are opening their own pressing plant, which is extremely exciting. It kind of justifies a little bit of the questionable behavior that I think Vinyl Me Please has exhibited with price hikes and various issues over the past few years that have kind of irked me as a longtime subscriber to their service. So I think this is a step in the right direction when it comes to QC and having the manpower and the machinery to be able to actually put out high quality records at high volume, which is something we haven't been able to do for the past few years. And it's led to a lot of quality control issues. It's led to lots of, random records being warped in huge runs of presses, leads to the wrong discs being put in the wrong jacket. It leads to damage on disc in the factory before it actually reaches your home. All of these things are just because it's just too chaotic. There's too much going on and the QC has suffered because of it. That's one issue. There's another issue I want to really bring light to in this video, and that's the fact that the issue is not with the pressing plant that your record sounds bad. The issue often falls in the chain prior to it even arriving at the plant. Now, I'm speaking with a little bit of authority. I wouldn't say I'm an expert about any of these processes, but I will say that I do run a record label. Completely sold out, 14 releases, 12 of them are in the hands of vinyl fans of this channel, and maybe even random people who don't know I exist, which is cool. That being said, I run this label by myself. It's just me overseeing these releases, working with the artists, working with the plants, occasionally working with the middleman, the shipping logistics, whatever it may be. It's just me. And I am super proud to say that every one of my releases sounds phenomenal. Some people say my first ever release, Fort Vine Stay Magical, is one of the best sounding records in their collection. I mean, if you go on Discogs and you look at all of the comments on all of my releases, just about every release has a number of comments just praising how quiet the album is, how dynamic it is, not just how beautiful it looks. I mean, it's easy to figure out a cool variant and match it to the cover, which somehow a lot of labels still kind of miss that sometimes and make a really random variant that makes no sense. That's neither here nor there. This is more about the actual disc itself, the music, the reason we listen to vinyl. The important part of this hobby is listening to your album and appreciating it, hopefully in a different way than you would appreciate it digitally. I am by myself making sure these records sound amazing, and they do. What boggles my mind to this day is how these other labels, from indie labels to majors, can consistently screw up their records to the point where some labels have a reputation. I'm not gonna put any label on blast in this video because that's not what I'm trying to do. But there are labels that have artists that I love where I'm hesitant to buy records from them because I know historically every one of their records they've released sounds average to bad. And that means it's either going to have intergroove distortion or it's going to be filled with non-fill, which is kind of like that swooshing sound in between tracks or when it gets quiet. It's going to have surface noise and pops when they shouldn't be there. I'm not talking about the normal amount. I'm talking about something that's higher and distracting from the source material itself. Now, this falls in a few different places on the chain. So the issue could be with the way the album was actually recorded. Sometimes the album gets messed up when it's recorded, and ideally in that scenario, you'd be able to notice in the digital, and that would also take place in the vinyl format. So that's something that can't really be avoided, and I think that's probably the smallest percentage of issues. The next step is how it is properly mastered. So mastering a record for digital and mastering for vinyl are completely different things. There are different mediums. You need to have different kind of levels and equalizing, and it's not something I can speak to because I'm not a mastering engineer, but I know how important it is as a music fan. If you don't take the time to properly master your record for vinyl and you just throw a digital master on there, it's not gonna sound great on your turntable. It's gonna sound just wrong or flat or lifeless, or even have audio issues that wouldn't be there in the digital just because of the limitations and the specifications of the medium. I make sure that I use someone that masters the record really well every time, specifically with the format of vinyl in mind. When I work with crates, which I've done with on 12 of my releases, they use a studio in France that I have been more than happy with. Every one of those releases sounds phenomenal on my turntable. And I've worked with other mastering engineers that know what they're doing to master some of the other non-crates records. Sometimes my band's Fort Vine works with people that knows how to master their stuff for vinyl, and it sounds better if you take the time to do that properly. So it's not even about just taking the step to do it, you have to make sure it's done well. There is an art to it, it's not just like hitting a bunch of buttons and letting it happen. There's an element of know-how that maybe people are getting it mastered for vinyl, but people that aren't quite sure what they're doing. And then there's the way that the lacquer is cut. You gotta have someone that knows what they're doing with that as well. I like to have Richard Houghton do my lacquers when I'm not doing crates because I trust him and he's a genius. Whoever crates uses to cut their lacquers at GZ, which is the plant they use, they do a great job too. GZ gets so much of a bad rap in this entire community. Whenever I see someone on Discogs or Reddit or some forum talk about GZ, there's always someone chiming in and saying, oh, GZ sucks. Oh, they're the worst plant. Oh, they mess everything up, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I don't trust GZ. I implicitly trust GZ. I have most of my records on my label are GZ, and they all sound a cut above an average record in my collection. Again, it falls in some link in the chain breaking or not being fully polished. It has nothing to do with GZ, and yes, they're one of the biggest plants all the way over in the Czech Republic, so there's probably more one-off issues than other plants because of that. But dollars to dollars, apples to apples, if you look at them compared to any other plant, they're not gonna do a worse job. It's just some of these issues in the chain prior that are causing the record to sound not great. But the biggest culprit of all, which I believe, is the next one I'm about to talk about. So beyond the mastering, beyond the cutting of the actual lacquer itself, there is a process that is extremely important and I take to heart, which is listening to the test press of your record. Before the run of records is finished, you are sent a series of 5 test presses and you listen to it to make sure there's no issues, make sure there's no skips, make sure there's no distortion, make sure there's no unnecessary static surface noise, pops. You listen to it with a critical ear and you're paying attention to it and you make sure that it sounds up to par. And if not, you get another test press made because that's gonna be what your entire run sounds like. It is an important ritual for my label to sit and listen to test pressings. I always make sure that I take the proper time to do so. I don't understand how these labels I mentioned before that are releasing records regularly can put out these records that have inner groove distortion, that have, staticky parts that shouldn't be there, just a large high-level noise floor of surface noise. It blows my mind. It's like, this is your job. This is your one job, is to put out records that sound good. And for some reason or another, people are listening to these test pressings and being like, yeah, this sounds good. Let's press 5,000 of these, let's go. I am just calling upon everybody who's in this industry to do better. And I'm not saying everybody is not doing better. I'm not trying to say everybody's doing it wrong and I'm doing it right. I'm just saying that all of us as fans can attest to the fact that we often get a record that we're excited to get and it sounds bad for one reason or another. And that's not fair to us as fans and collectors who pay a premium to enjoy this music in our preferred way through the turntable and have the record sound bad. It's a slap in the face when you pay $40 for an album and you get it and it's super noisy, or there's inner groove distortion, or there's something that just makes it unlistenable to you. It shouldn't have to be that way. And my label is direct proof of that. if one person can do it across the board consistently, you can too. And I'm speaking to every label on the planet. So some labels really have it nailed, and I have so many labels that I love and respect, and I think all their releases sound incredible, and I have major respect for their dedication to the process from A to Z. But there are some labels I love, because the people are cool and the music is good, but I've lost respect for them because I'm like, how could you consistently fail to do the simple thing, which is QC? This is my rant. Tell me if you agree with this, if you have any thoughts on this, because I, as a record label owner, have been baffled by this for years and years, and I just would love to know if there's a reason that I don't know about that could be causing some of these issues. But I really, it's so simple. It's just master for vinyl, make sure it sounds good in the test pressing, press it, send it. That's it. And something gets lost in translation. So leave a comment with your thoughts on this subject. I'm very curious to hear what you think. And record store is opening in a couple weeks. So look forward to more content about that as we move forward towards May 22nd, the opening date. Thank you guys so much for watching. More coming soon. Take it easy.